Long before the crowds gathered around Jesus, long before one desperate touch changed history, there was simply a woman whose life looked remarkably ordinary. The scriptures never tell us her name, and perhaps there's a reason for that. By leaving her unnamed, her story becomes timeless. She could have been someone's daughter, someone's wife, someone's sister, or someone's neighbor. She lived among the people of Israel during a time when faith shaped every part of daily life. The rhythm of her days was marked by sunrise and sunset, by Sabbath worship, by family meals, by the familiar sounds of merchants calling through narrow streets, and by the quiet prayers whispered each evening before sleep. Like many women of her generation, she likely dreamed of building a peaceful home, raising children, and growing old surrounded by those she loved. These were not extraordinary dreams. They were the hopes shared by countless.
No one knows exactly how it began. The gospel writers do not tell us whether it started suddenly or developed gradually over time. They simply tell us the heartbreaking reality. According to Mark 5, verse 25, and a certain woman, which had an issue of blood 12 years. Those few words summarize more than a decade of unrelenting suffering. What may have first appeared to be a temporary illness became a condition that refused to end. Day after day, week after week, month after month, the bleeding continued. As the weeks turned into years, every sunrise brought the same disappointment. Every evening ended with the same unanswered prayer. She woke each morning hoping something would be different, only to discover that nothing had changed. 12 years is difficult to comprehend. It is long enough for a child to grow into adolescence, long enough for families to move, businesses to rise and fall, and entire communities to change. Yet while life continued for everyone around her, hers seemed frozen in a season of pain that would not let go. The physical suffering alone would have been overwhelming. Continuous blood loss often leaves the body exhausted, weak, and unable to recover its strength. Even simple daily tasks become difficult when the body is constantly deprived of what it needs to function. The woman with the issue of blood stepped out into the streets with a purpose she had never carried before. She was no longer searching for another physician. She was no longer looking for another remedy or another promise that would end in disappointment. This journey was different. It rested on one simple belief that had taken root in her heart through the testimonies she had heard. If the stories about Jesus were true, then perhaps her story was not over. But believing and acting are often separated by the hardest step of all. To reach Jesus, she would have to walk directly into the very place she had spent years trying to avoid, a crowd. As she approached, the sound reached her before the people did. Voices echoed through the streets from every direction. Some were calling to friends who had arrived ahead of them. Others were speaking excitedly about miracles they had witnessed only days before. Parents lifted children onto their shoulders for a better view. Merchants paused their work to watch the growing procession move through the town. Travelers who had walked for hours stood eagerly along the roadside, hoping to catch even a glimpse of Jesus. There was movement everywhere. Feet shuffled across dry roads, leaving clouds of dust hanging in the warm air. The narrow streets that normally carried ordinary traffic were now overflowing with people whose expectations grew with every passing moment. At the center of it all was Jesus. He was surrounded on every side. The Gospel of Mark describes the crowd as pressing around him. It was not an orderly gathering. People moved as close as they possibly could. Some reached toward him. Others called out his name. The disciples worked to keep pace as the crowd surged forward, making every step more difficult than the last. Everyone wanted something. Some wanted healing. Others wanted answers. Some simply wanted to witness what might happen next. The atmosphere was filled with anticipation because wherever Jesus went, lives were being changed. Standing at the edge of that crowd, the woman with the issue of blood understood exactly what she was about to risk. For 12 years, she had lived with the knowledge that her condition separated her from others under the ceremonial laws described in Leviticus. Entering such a tightly packed crowd meant coming close to people who would never willingly have approached her if they knew her condition. If someone recognized her, she could be confronted publicly. She could be forced to leave before reaching Jesus. The whisper she had endured for years could quickly become loud accusations. Every painful memory of rejection returned at once, reminding her of everything she had already lost. Her body offered little encouragement. 12 years of continual suffering had left her physically drained. Every movement demanded effort. Her strength was not what it had once been. Even standing for long periods could have been exhausting. Yet now she faced a moving crowd that showed no sign of slowing down. The dust beneath her feet made every... As the months turned into years, the woman with the issue of blood refused to surrender without a fight. She was determined to find healing, no matter how difficult the journey became. The Gospel of Mark tells us that she had suffered much under many physicians. That brief statement speaks volumes. It tells us she did not simply visit one healer and give up. She sought help again and again, placing her trust in every physician who claimed to have an answer. Each visit began with cautious optimism. Each recommendation carried the possibility that this time, at last, her suffering would come to an end. Every new treatment represented another opportunity to reclaim the life she had lost. She wanted to believe that someone, somewhere, possessed the knowledge that could finally restore her health. Medical care in the ancient world was very different from what people know today. Physicians did not have modern laboratories, advanced imaging, antibiotics, or a clear understanding of many diseases. Treatments were often based on observation, inherited traditions, and remedies passed down through generations. Some physicians prescribed carefully prepared mixtures of herbs and oils. Others relied on strict dietary changes, mineral compounds, or unusual medicinal practices that reflected the medical understanding of the time. While some of these remedies may have provided temporary relief for certain conditions, many illnesses remained beyond the limits of ancient medicine. Patients often endured repeated treatments that were expensive, uncomfortable, and ultimately unsuccessful. The woman likely followed every instruction she was given. She may have traveled long distances to consult respected healers whose reputations offered a small spark of hope. Perhaps one physician confidently assured her that recovery was only weeks away, while another insisted that a different remedy would succeed where others had failed. Every appointment required another payment. Every treatment demanded another measure of patience. Every disappointment left her carrying the same illness home once again. With each passing season, the pattern repeated itself. Hope would rise. Expectations would grow. Then the treatment would fail, leaving her exactly where she had started. Mark's gospel records something especially heartbreaking. Rather than becoming better, she grew worse. Those words reveal that the years were not merely standing still. They were becoming increasingly difficult. Her strength continued to decline. The burden she carried became heavier. Every failed attempt reminded her that time was slipping away while her condition remained unchanged. The disease did not pause to give her a chance to recover emotionally. It continued relentlessly, day after day, year after year. Then came another painful reality. The money began to disappear. Luke records that she spent all her living upon physicians. Every coin she had carefully saved was exchanged for another promise of healing. What may have once been a comfortable life gradually gave way to financial hardship. Possessions were likely sold. Savings were exhausted. Resources that could have supported her future slowly vanished until there was almost nothing left. The illness had become expensive in every possible way. It had demanded her health, her energy, her place within the community, and now it had consumed her financial security as well. The longer her suffering continued, the more difficult relationships became. Friends who had once visited regularly may have stopped coming as often. Some may have struggled to understand why her condition never improved. Others may have quietly accepted that this was simply how her life would remain. Invitations became increasingly rare. Familiar conversations fadez. Loneliness settled in where laughter had once been. The woman found herself, while the woman with the issue of blood was fighting a battle that seemed to have no end, Another story was unfolding across the towns and villages of Galilee. News was spreading with remarkable speed about a teacher unlike any the people had ever seen. His name was Jesus of Nazareth, and wherever he went, large crowds followed. Some came because they had witnessed extraordinary events with their own eyes. Others came because someone they trusted had returned home with a story that seemed almost impossible to believe. In an age without newspapers, television, or the internet, news traveled from person to person. Merchants carried stories from one marketplace to another. Travelers shared accounts along dusty roads. Families repeated what they had heard around their evening meals. Before long, the name of Jesus was being spoken in villages throughout Galilee, Judea, and beyond. Jesus' ministry had already begun transforming countless lives. The gospel accounts describe him teaching with an authority that astonished even the religious leaders. He explained the scriptures with clarity and compassion, revealing the heart of God's kingdom in ways that people had never experienced before. Crowds listened for hours, hanging on every word because his message offered hope to ordinary men and women who often felt forgotten. It was not only his teaching that captured people's attention. Reports of extraordinary miracles accompanied him wherever he traveled. The blind received their sight. Those unable to walk stood up and walked again. People suffering from diseases found themselves completely restored. Those oppressed by evil spirits were set free. Every miracle became another testimony, and every testimony inspired another person to seek him. As these accounts spread, the crowds became larger. People traveled for miles, leaving their homes before sunrise just for the chance to see Jesus. Some carried sick relatives on makeshift beds. Others brought children, hoping for a blessing. Many simply wanted to hear him speak. The roads leading into towns where Jesus was expected often filled with people from every direction, each carrying their own burdens, questions, and hopes. Some had exhausted every human solution before deciding to search for him. Others came because someone they loved had experienced a miracle that no one could explain. There was an unmistakable sense that something extraordinary was taking place, and no one wanted to miss it. The growing faith in Jesus was not based on rumors alone. It was built upon countless personal testimonies. The issue of blood had spent 12 years searching for healing, but now everything depended on what happened in the next heartbeat. The crowd continued to press against Jesus from every direction. People jostled for position. Voices filled the air. Dust rose beneath countless feet. No one noticed the trembling woman quietly extending her hand through the crowd. To everyone else, she was simply another face among many. But for her, this was the moment that would determine whether hope would finally become reality or disappear forever. She had already settled the question in her heart. Mark's gospel tells us what she believed before she ever reached him. If I may touch but his clothes, I shall be whole. It was not superstition that moved her forward. She did not believe there was power in the fabric itself. Her confidence rested completely in the one wearing the garment. After 12 years of disappointment, she believed that Jesus possessed the authority no physician had ever demonstrated. She did not ask for the attention of the crowd. She did not expect Jesus to stop and speak with her. She sought only one small point of contact, convinced that even the slightest connection with him would be enough. Her hand moved forward slowly. The distance was no more than a few inches. People continued pressing against Jesus, unaware that history was unfolding beside them. The disciples focused on clearing a path through the crowd. Jairus, whose daughter was gravely ill, anxiously waited for Jesus to continue toward his home. Everyone's attention was fixed on reaching the next destination, except hers. Her eyes never left the edge of his garment. For a brief moment, the crowd shifted just enough to create an opening. She reached forward. Her fingers touched the fringe of his garment. In that instant, everything changed. There was no long ceremony, no dramatic announcement, no visible display for the crowd. According to Mark 5, verse 29, immediately the fountain of her blood was dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of that plague. The miracle happened instantly. The suffering that had defined the last 12 years of her life came to an end in a single moment. The bleeding stopped. The condition that every physician had failed to cure simply ceased. The weakness that had become her constant companion gave way to a strength she had not felt in years. Her body told her what no doctor ever could. She knew, beyond every doubt, that she had been healed. Imagine the emotions flooding her heart at that very second. For 12 years, she had awakened each morning expecting another day of pain. Now, for the first time in over a decade, the burden was gone. The endless cycle had been broken. The disease no longer held power over her life. Every failed treatment, every lonely night, every tear, every unanswered question suddenly belonged to the past. She had come expecting hope. She was leaving with healing. As the woman with the issue of blood finished telling the whole truth, the crowd remained completely silent. Every person waited for Jesus to respond. Some may have expected a rebuke. Others may have wondered whether he would remind her of the ceremonial laws she had lived under for the past 12 years. In doing so, Jesus restored far more than her physical health. Her place within the community could now be restored. The condition that had made her ceremonially unclean had ended. According to the biblical account, the flow of blood had stopped immediately, removing the ongoing cause of her ceremonial uncleanness. The years of separation no longer defined her future. She could once again participate fully in the religious and social life for which her illness had kept her apart. The woman who had approached Jesus in fear now stood before the people as living evidence of God's compassion and power. More than 2,000 years have passed since the woman with the issue of blood quietly reached through a crowded street and touched the edge of Jesus' garment. Empires have risen and fallen. Civilizations have changed. Technology has transformed the world in ways the people standing in that crowd could never have imagined. Yet her story continues to be told because it speaks to something timeless within every human heart. It reminds us that suffering does not have the final word, that hope can survive even the longest seasons of disappointment, and that one encounter with Jesus can change a life forever. The woman with the issue of blood teaches us that faith is often tested not over days or weeks, but over years. 12 years is a long time to wait. 12 years is enough time for dreams to fade, for resources to disappear, and for discouragement to settle deeply into the heart. Many people would have stopped believing long before she reached that crowd. Many would have accepted that nothing would ever change. Yet despite every disappointment, despite every failed physician, despite every unanswered question, she refused to let go of the possibility that God could still do what no human being could accomplish. Her story also reminds us that repeated disappointment does not mean God has forgotten us. She had experienced failure after failure. Every treatment had promised relief, and every one of them had fallen short. Her savings were gone. Her strength had been drained. Her place within the community had been altered by circumstances beyond her control. From a human perspective, there seemed to be no reason left to hope. But the very moment she believed everything had been exhausted became the moment she encountered Jesus. Sometimes God's answer arrives after every other solution has reached its limit, making it unmistakably clear that the miracle belongs to Him alone. Perhaps one of the most beautiful truths in this account is that Jesus saw someone everyone else overlooked. The crowd was enormous. Jairus, a respected synagogue leader, urgently needed Jesus to save his dying daughter. Hundreds of people surrounded him, each carrying their own needs and expectations. Yet Jesus stopped for one woman who had spent years living in quiet suffering. He noticed the person others had learned to ignore. He recognized the faith hidden beneath fear. He valued someone society had pushed to the edges. That truth remains just as powerful today. No matter how invisible someone may feel, no life escapes the attention of Christ. This remarkable account also teaches us that God's restoration reaches far beyond physical healing. The bleeding stopped immediately, but Jesus knew that healing her body alone was not enough. That is why He called her daughter. That is why He invited her to tell the whole truth before the crowd.
That is why he publicly declared that her faith had made her well. He restored her dignity before restoring her place in the community. He restored her identity before sending her away in peace. He restored her sense of belonging after 12 years of isolation. In Christ, healing is never merely about removing pain. It is about restoring the whole person.